In a year where Big Ten football almost didn't happen, where change happened daily, and where fans were living in constant uncertainty, comes a season of epic proportions. A season where the Indiana Hoosiers are bolstering one of the best rosters in decades. A season where expectations couldn't be higher, and the Hoosier Network coverage could not be greater. Welcome to The Rundown, a weekly pregame show that will bring together the greatest journalism that IU sports media has to offer. Each week, our team will give you the insight, The interviews and the facts fans need to get ready for game day can be found right here on our show. So get ready. It's game day, and the rundown starts right now. Would have guessed that we are going to have a 1-0 Indiana Hoosiers versus a 1-0 Rutgers going into week 2. Two Big Ten powerhouses for week 2. What's up? Welcome to the Rundown. I'm Griffin Gonzalez. Beside me, my co-host in person this week, Connor Hines. Connor, great to be with you. We got a loaded show today.
We really do. It's week 2. Indiana's 1-0. I mean, talk about momentum from last week with last week's win over Penn State. Hey, Rutgers, not a team to overlook, right? We've got a lot to get to on the show today. It's going to be a fun week because Rutgers in the past has been just that. They've been Rutgers, but they're 1-0 as well. This is different for so many reasons in 2020, so packed show ahead.
And listen, we got a lot of analysts coming on today. We have Griffin Epstein. You met him last week. He gave us tons and tons of information getting you ready for kickoff. We are also going to have Jack Ankeny back in studio. He's going to have all the insight on Rutgers. And today, later in the show, we're going to be joined by Galen Clavio, once again, the doctor of not just sports media, but also, barbecue, tailgating. He knows he's going to be talking to us about what he's cooking up today for a little New Jersey football action. Now, here's the deal. Last week, we see Indiana beat up on Penn State in one of the most, I would say, Mount Rushmore games of the past 2 decades for Indiana football. And what a ball game that was. We actually have our man, Kurt Spittler. We talked to him last week from Memorial Stadium. He had the video ready. He had the recap. And Austin Render, the voice of WIUX, narrating it all the way. Let's take a look.
Indiana hurries to the line. Clock starts down to 26 seconds. Snap, Penix, touchdown! Indiana scores! 75 yards! 2-point conversion away from tying this game. Penix all by himself. They need the 2-point conversion to force overtime. Snap to Penix. It's a QB run, and he's in! Michael Penix scores! Indiana has forced overtime! Score a touchdown to tie this game. Penix drops, throws, looking for the end zone. Montpelier, did he get a foot down? He did! Touchdown, Indiana! Needing 2-point conversion to win. For the end zone, they gave it to him! Penix scores! Williams State.
It gives me chills just watching that video by Kurt Spiller. I mean, what a ball game that was. Hines, I gotta ask, when you watched it live, did you think it was good? Did you think they got the 2-point conversion?
The experience of an Indiana football fan just dictates that you're just going to assume that nothing goes your way, but that night it did. What a night in Bloomington. You have to think that Kirkwood Avenue would just be so much more than what it was if not for the pandemic and for everything in 2020. But what a remarkable night in Bloomington. What a remarkable game, regardless, fans or not, right? I mean, the atmosphere was not there, but the outcome that was going to be there regardless. And Tom Allen talking after the game. I mean, no fans were gonna ruin Tom Allen's excitement last weekend rather against Penn State. I mean, what a game! One of the biggest, at least in my time following Indiana football, and I'm sure yours as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I bet one guy on the street. We're going to get to that later on Kirkwood. We're going to see what the celebration was like. But for right now, let's actually bring in our reporter, Griffin Epstein. He was covering the game for the Hoosier Network last week. Griff, great to see you. I see you're back in the WIUX studios for this ball game today. You watched the game last week. You covered every single angle of it. Just what were your impressions of that matchup?
Well, it was just an incredible game that we'll never forget, and it's what makes college football so great. The back and forth craziness. It wasn't necessarily a pretty football game, But it was, the fight by both Penn State to come back in that game after they struggled through so much of it. And then, of course, Indiana with that stunning drive to tie the game at the end of the fourth quarter and then winning in overtime. And it just felt like that was the only way Indiana was going to get over the hump. And, especially for you, Gonzo, you've covered Indiana football and watched it for such a long time. That's the problem, especially in these last 10 years under Kevin Wilson and Tom Allen. Indiana has been able to keep up with these top 25 opponents. In fact, I saw a stat recently. Indiana over the last decade has the second most losses by a touchdown or less out of anyone in FBS. 3 times they had done that. It looked like it was going to happen again, but it was just there was something different this time. And whether that was, Tom Allen's motivation, whether it was all the adversity this team had already faced in the offseason, or whether it was just this team had a lot more experience and had remembered the Tennessee game of last year that they blew, remembered the Penn State game last year that they, gave up a 9-minute drive that if they had made a stop probably would have won that game. Whatever the case, Indiana needed a couple miracles to go their way. They did, and they were ready. And man, Michael Penix had such a bad game, but when he was able to turn it on, that was exactly why Indiana fans were so excited about him all season long, because he just took over. I mean, my article after the game called him a messiah, and that's what he looked like. He looked like the savior to Indiana football to bring them to a level that, in my mind, we haven't seen since, I think, 1967, the last time IU went to the Rose Bowl.
Well, Griff, you mentioned just that. You talked to Michael Penix. You talked about Michael Penix being the messiah. And I mean, the disappointment from last year when Michael Penix was not able to do what he does. Obviously, Peyton Ramsey, we know the story there. But for Michael Penix to come back, not have a good game in any stretch, and then still take Indiana to the promised land against the top 10 team, I mean, what does that do for the psyche of this team? Not only Michael Penix, but the entire Indiana team. It's been since '87.
I mean, I think that's the thing that made fans so excited as well. It wasn't just that Penn State, and Penn State played awful for so much of that game, but it wasn't just that Penn State lost the game, and they did blow the game. If Devin Ford doesn't go to the end zone, Penn State wins. But it's that after they got a chance, Indiana went out and won it and proved the talent on offense that we didn't see all game long. We finally saw it, in that last drive and then in overtime against one of the best defenses and one of the best defensive lines in the Big Ten, that Indiana was able to step up when it matters most. And, that is the mantra of a top 20 team. That is how, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, that's how they win these games, to come back and take advantage of opportunities and mistakes. And it just showed that, mentally, which I think has always been a big thing for IU, because the program's DNA is to blow games. To break that DNA is huge going forward, because we know probably this year Indiana is going to have another close game with a top 20 team, whether that's, Purdue in the bucket game, which I'm very high on. I think they're going to be ranked at the end of the season, or whether that's just Michigan next week. Indiana now knows how to do it, and that just makes it so much easier to do it again, because they finally have the monkey off the back.
Michael Penix, 19 of 36 for 170 yards in that game, and still able to grab the win. What about the defense, Griffin? 3 first-half turnovers. You mentioned how Penn State really looked anything but Penn State, especially in that first half. But Indiana's defense maybe turning into a bit of a calling card for Tom Allen this year?
Yeah, I think they were the storyline for most of the game, and we didn't expect it. I mean, we thought, this offense, they're going to put up 30 points a game, even against the defense like Penn State. They really struggled. But, man, the defense was just, I thought, absolutely incredible for most of that game. And you look at the stats and you say, well, they gave up 450 yards against a really good offense. But what they did, which we haven't seen Indiana defenses do in years past, is they did not break. And, Penn State made the red zone 6 times. They only scored on 3 of them. Indiana forced turnovers. They got off the field and forced field goals, which Penn State missed all 3. And we have never seen that from Indiana defense during the Tom Allen era, definitely not during the Kevin Wilson era. And I think a big part of it, the defensive players, Kane Womack said all offseason, we have the experience, we have the players, we're going to finally put it together. I don't think anyone really believed them, because we hadn't seen it before. But I really think that experience has made a difference for this Indiana defense. They had the 13th most returning production, according to ESPN's Bill Connolly, who has a metric that he measures that of any team in FBS. And it was the situational awareness was so good for Indiana. They got off the field on 3rd down. until that final touchdown to Jahan Dotson in the fourth quarter. They prevented those big plays. They slowed down the run game and made Penn State one-dimensional. And Penn State, besides that last play, I was actually looking earlier today, they didn't have any other plays of over 20 yards. So they did bend, but they did not break against a good offense. And it was really impressive and a really good sign going forward for Indiana, because in the Big Ten, defense wins championships.
I think we got time for like 30 seconds more. Let me ask you this. If Indiana is going to have to rely on their defense this season, is that going to be an issue for the Hoosiers going down the stretch?
I don't think they will. That's my biggest question going into today's game against Rutgers is, can we see Michael Penix against a defense that's not as talented in Rutgers, but also isn't awful perform? But no, I don't think if Indiana's offense, cannot perform and has, 200 yards per game, as they didn't even reach that against Penn State, they're not going to be able to beat other top 25 teams, because quite simply, there was magic in the air last Saturday. The defense forced 3 turnovers. The Penn State couldn't make a field goal kick, and Penn State had 10 penalties for 100 yards. That's not going to happen again against the top 25 team. It does not diminish that game last Saturday, because something like that needed to happen for IU to break the hump. But I do think Indiana's defense, especially also being on the field for 40 minutes, your offense just needs to at least control possession a little bit better and have some longer drives, even if they don't score more points. Otherwise, I don't think IU would be able to knock off a team of Penn State's caliber going forward this season.
Thanks so much, Griff. We're going to come back to you later for the breakdown. We're going to have you and Ankeny kind of go at it on both IU football teams. Breaking news right now. IU just actually released their inactives for today. Among that is David Ellis, not going to be playing today, listed as inactive by Indiana football. So if David Ellis is out, like they're saying, how does that impact Indiana's receiving game, Connor?
Jack Ankeny wrote about it on the Hoosier Network this week. The young receiving core has been everything for Indiana so far. I think they have plenty of options at their disposal here today. I don't know if that's really something you need to worry about, David Ellis in particular, just because we haven't seen him be as much of a factor, at least through 1 week of play. At the same time, we've talked about it all week. The amount of options at Indiana's disposal, at Tom Allen's disposal, that is the calling card. That is the strength moving forward. Don't think it should be too much of a concern, at least for today.
Well, week 1 of play brought a lot of fun, especially after beating a top 10 team in the country. How much fun? Well, you got to go to Kirkwood, the land of fun, especially on the weekend here in Bloomington. We hit Kirkwood to talk to fans about seeing how they were feeling following the win, and we're going to watch that right now.
Go check it out. On Kirkwood, Indiana has done it. They've knocked off a top 10 team.
Yes, we did. First time since 1987. We're actually on cloud 9 right now. Michael Penix Jr., I don't know if he got in, but there's not enough to overrule that. So that's a touchdown. That's a touchdown,
brother. We're here with Mason. Mason is celebrating a
Wait,
big...
what's your name?
I'm Griffin. Nice to meet you, man.
Mason and Griffin here, reporting live.
Mason, how you feeling after IU gets their biggest upset, arguably since 1987?
Dude, I've never felt more better in my whole life. I'm so proud to be a Hoosier right now. It is amazing. It is amazing.
You say, is there anything you'd like to say to your friends back home in Pennsylvania?
I'm glad that we kicked their ass tonight. We kicked their ass.
I am ecstatic. This is the most excited I've been for Hoosier football for the past 3 years I've been following it.
I'm going to be honest, man. I've been watching IU football for 20 years. This is the most excited I've ever been for IU football. I'm going to be real with you.
We want Bama! We want Bama! We want Bama!
In all seriousness, we probably should get through Ohio State first, but then Alabama. How are we feeling after this win?
We're feeling sorry, I can't curse on television. We're feeling great. Big win.
We're gonna take it to next week. We're gonna go. I'm not gonna lie. They had us the first half. They had us the first half. Sean Clifford.
We want Clemson! We want Clemson!
So keep doing you. I love it. Everybody, let's Hoosiers. Thank you.
Michael Penix, he's Heisman worthy right now. He's Heisman worthy.
Nah. He did only have 150
It doesn't matter. He got the W. He got the W.
The Hoosiers are not losers anymore. Let's go Hoosiers.
CNC is hopping tonight, baby. They want all. Oh no. Oh. Let's go. Let's go. Watch your water. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. One last question for all of you. Is Indiana University a football school?
Yeah!
Simply put, we're a last year and a half. We're a winning school. We're a football team. Last year and a half.
One more question. Is IU a football school?
I think it is becoming a football school over a basketball school. After that game right there, I truly believe it is becoming a football school.
Is Indiana a football school now?
We are back! I'm sniffing roses, baby.
IU is a football school.
Let's go! Let's go! Woo! Nobody thought we would win. Except for us. Except for us. And we did.
So there you have it. Indiana knocks off number 8 Penn State, and Hoosier fans might be celebrating a little more than the team. I'm not going to lie, but here we are. Bloomington, Indiana is home to possibly a football school. Yes! And this is Bloomington now. Get ready. Full season right here on the Hoosier Network.
Griffin, great stuff. I mean, last weekend, Saturday night. First of all, did you feel safe out there?
Man, I got COVID the next day. Don't you worry. No, I mean, listen, it was a lot of fun. It was interesting in the standpoint that it kind of had that Kentucky, Indiana vibe where it's like you've been waiting and waiting and waiting for so long. Where is it? And it was finally there. It was finally where you wanted it to be. And I think this Indiana team is well-deserved. It deserved that win, and we're seeing them come close that much. Students are excited.
I mean, you've been following this Indiana team much longer than the past few years. What has this been like for you? I mean, following the evolution of Indiana football.
The evolution of Indiana football is interesting because I think you feel like this giant momentum swing was just waiting for this giant tilt to fall off the cliff. You were getting closer and closer and closer, yet it wasn't happening. And when you beat a team like Penn State, even if Penn State isn't on Penn State's level this season, finally getting that top 10 win is one you can't underestimate the power of. And having that was huge.
Well, hey, now we turn our focus to Rutgers. Griffin had something on that earlier this week, introducing a little 2-minute drill, a little new segment here. We're going to run that now.
Hey there, Griffin Epstein.
Hey, what's up? I'm Griffin Gonzalez, and this is the 2-minute drill presented by the Hoosier Network. We're going to give you the full scouting report on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. 2 minutes, let's go. Now, here's the deal. 2020 has been weird for a lot of reasons, but one of the weirdest things to happen yet is Rutgers football might actually be good. I know, crazy. But to understand why that is, you got to go all the way back to 2000 when they've hired their first head coach for the second time now, and I don't know. Greg Schiano. Now listen, it was a rough first few years, but then he had an 11-2 season in 2005. Rutgers football was back, and Greg Schiano was going to bowl game to bowl game to bowl game until he actually left East Rutherford, New Jersey for Tampa Bay to take the Buccaneers head coaching job. After 2 years in the NFL, Schiano actually returned to the college game to be an assistant coach for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Then, on December 1st of last year, Greg Schiano returned to East Rutherford, New Jersey for his second stint with the Rutgers, claiming that together we will... You know what? I'm just going to let him say it. We'll be number one! And this week, they kind of are number one, or at least tied with a 1-0 record in Big Ten play. Now, let's talk about last week's win at Michigan State. Now, takeaways were big in this one for the Rutgers defense. They had 7 in this ball game alone. And just for a reference point, they had 12 last season. In a full season. Crazy. They finished 2-10 as one of the worst teams in the Big Ten last year. And because of the dominant defense this last week, senior linebacker Alakunal Fatukasi, I think we nailed it. I think we got it. Was named the co-Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week alongside Indiana's very own Jamar Johnson. But defense is not just the only name of the game for this Rutgers squad. Remember last year when that quarterback for Rutgers threw 1 passing yard? That is 3 feet. Quarterback Noah Verdral, the Nebraska transfer, 18 of 29 for 169 yards and a touchdown against the Michigan State Spartans. And he added a rushing touchdown as well. As for running the ball, Isaiah Pacheco is back and ready for more after a 2-touchdown performance last week. So what should we expect in this Week 2 matchup? Defense, and yeah, more defense, okay? Both these teams won their Week 1 games because of their ability to play on the defensive side of the ball. If the Rutgers are able to get stops, keep Michael Penix uncomfortable in that pocket, and get their offense going, we might see Rutgers walk away 2-0 in the Big Ten for the first time since joining the conference in 2014. Boom, that's our time. We'll see you next time on the 2-Minute Drill.
All right, Griff, great stuff there. Good little 2-minute drill, nice little rundown of what we can expect this week. We are now going to be joined by, I believe, Jack Ankin here, one of our resident football beat reporters here.
Yeah, how's it going, Connor? Really excited for this game today. I think for when you look at Rutgers' offense, it's similar to IU in a way. They feature an experienced running back in Isaiah Pacheco. He had those 2 touchdowns last week versus Michigan State, so I think he's going to challenge that IU defensive line. At quarterback, it's Noah Verdral. We talked about him. I saw him last year when he was the Nebraska quarterback. He had some problems with accuracy in Week 1 versus Michigan State. But, he can make plays with his feet. And if we remember last week back to the Penn State game, IU struggled to contain the run of Sean Clifford. So they kind of need to learn from that to contain Noah Verdral. Yeah, Connor, I think this is a big game for Penix. He made the big play at the end, but he didn't look too sharp for most of the game. Rutgers is going to be hunting for turnovers. They had 7 of them last week versus Michigan State. So it'll be really important for Penix, I think, to get settled in early, find that rhythm and keep the Rutgers defense guessing. We've talked about all the weapons that IU has on offense, and I think it'll be really important for him to spread the ball around today.
Yeah, we talked to Griffin Epstein about this just a couple minutes ago. I mean, how does this turn into a get-right game for Michael Penix? Because, there's no secret about it. Michael Penix did not have a good game last week. Kind of got away with one in beating Penn State. How does this turn into sort of a get-right game? Rutgers is 1-0, but again, we'll say it all day. Rutgers is Rutgers. How does Michael Penix take advantage of the weaknesses of the Scarlet Knights today?
Right. Well, Rutgers forced 7 turnovers last week. I don't see that happening again. I don't think they're a defense that's going to dominate and really carry Rutgers all the way through. So I think for Penix, this is a game where he can really focus on, let's get in a rhythm. Let's spread the ball around. Let's find my different targets. And I think that'll be really big for him if he can, just get settled in. We saw him at the start of the game. He was making some overthrows. He might have been a little bit excited for a big matchup in Week 1 against Penn State. He did come up clutch in the end, but I think a more consistent performance is something that we might be trying to look for from Penix this week.
All right, Jack, we're going to take a key playmaker from you for both sides. Let's start with Indiana. Obviously, Michael Penix was the story of last week, but I think personally, Indiana's run game, a really underrated element here. I think Stevie Scott's going to play a big role. Obviously, we talked about the defense with Griffin Epstein just a few minutes ago. Where do you see this thing going today? Who's the standout guy for Indiana on the road today in Piscataway?
Yeah, well, you talked about Stevie Scott. He's going to be someone that's going to be heavily involved in every game, but I'm going to go with someone else. I'll go with Whop Fillier. He's a name that most Indiana fans know. He didn't have the biggest Week 1 performance. Besides that touchdown that he had in overtime, he only had 27 receiving yards. So I think Penix is going to look to Whop early and often to try to establish that rhythm that we talked about.
And how about Rutgers? I mean, we talked about Noah Vedral. IU has the benefit of having already played him in the last year when Indiana was able to get that big win against Nebraska. But I mean, look, Nebraska was not Nebraska in that game. You have to take that with a grain of salt. Noah Vedral's a new quarterback at this point. Who's going to be the difference maker for Rutgers today in week 1, or week 2 rather, as they try to improve to 2-0?
Yeah, for Rutgers, I'll go with Bo Melton. He's the senior receiver on this receiving core. Last week, he had 4 catches for 50 yards. I think he's going to be someone that Vedral's going to look to try to get the offense going. You know, Vedral was only 18 for 29 last week, so I think Melton is someone, he's a reliable target that he can look to with that experience that he has. And Melton is also a threat on special teams. Last week, he recovered a fumble on a punt that Michigan muffed, setting up Rutgers for a touchdown. So I think IU's got to keep their eyes on him in multiple facets of this game.
Hey, Jack, before we let you go, we're going to get a few keys to an Indiana victory from you. Indiana, a big double-digit favorite in this one, going on the road at Rutgers. How do you see this thing shaking out? What does Indiana need to do in order to improve to 2-0 this weekend?
Right, Connor. We already talked about how important it is for Penix to play better, but I think what could be more important is something that's less talked about this Indiana team, and that's the defensive line. Isaiah Pacheco, he's the running back for Rutgers that we talked about earlier, but also it'll be important to contain the run of Vedral. He likes to get out of the pocket, kind of create plays with his feet too, and he struggled with accuracy against Michigan State. So if the IU defensive line can bring that pressure, guys, like James Head, Cam Jones, Micah McFadden, some of the linebackers even too, if they can consistently apply that kind of pressure, I think we're going to see even more inaccuracy from Vedral if he's kind of under duress throughout the game.
Hey, Jack, great stuff as always. Really appreciate your help. You have a good Saturday, and go enjoy this one, okay?
All right, thanks, Connor. You too.
All right. Well, Griffin Epstein and Jack got to go to Memorial Stadium recently and give us even more of a breakdown of what we can expect from Rutgers and IU today. Let's run that now.
Hey there, Griffin Epstein, Jack Ankeny outside of Memorial Stadium as we are previewing the game in Piscataway today as 2 undefeated teams go at it. Who would have expected that? Rutgers, IU, number 17 Indiana, coming off one of their biggest victories in program history. Rutgers, not a team we expected to be very good this season, but now they win against Michigan State. Can they compete today against Indiana?
I think Rutgers can compete today. They have a very experienced running back in Isaiah Pacheco, who had a great game last week with 2 touchdowns. I think there are some questions at quarterback. Noah Vedral was a little bit inaccurate last week. I think that gives IU a great chance to create some turnovers in the secondary, though.
Obviously a huge win for Indiana last week against Penn State, but it wasn't all roses. There were some definite thorns. They say the biggest improvement for a team is from week 1 to week 2. What do you want to see the Hoosiers improve on today in Piscataway?
Yeah, well, he was the hero of the game, but for the vast majority of the game, Michael Penix did not look very sharp. He came out of the gate kind of missing some throws, looking a little bit inaccurate. So I think it'll be really important for Indiana, for Michael Penix, to get comfortable right away. Find that rhythm, spread the ball around, create some plays with his feet. And then on 3rd down, I think that's important too. Indiana was 4 for 12 in that respect against Penn State, so that's got to improve today.
All right, it's prediction time, Jack. Indiana has not won as a top 20 team since 1988. Do they get it done today against Rutgers?
I think they do. I think Rutgers can hang with Indiana through the first half. I don't see them getting 7 turnovers like they did last week. Indiana's an offense that can score. They only had the ball for 20 minutes last week, but put up 28 points in regulation. So I'm going to go in this one, Indiana 31, Rutgers 20.
Jack has IU going 2-0 into a big game against Michigan next week. Stay tuned to the Hoosier Network all day. We'll have live updates throughout your evening. For Jack, I'm Griffin. We'll see you soon.
All right, welcome back. We are now getting ready for a little segment on the show called The Breakdown. It'd be nice to be on camera. It's cool. We just want to see more of Connor really quick. There we go. Now we got it set up. Now we're ready for a little setup called The Breakdown. Here's how it's going to work. I got with me 2 great analysts, Connor Hines and Jack Ankeny. They just talked a little IU football. Now I'm going to make them go head-to-head here. We're going to go through scenarios of today's game. They're going to debate whether they think it will or will not happen. Gentlemen, you guys ready to go? Let's do this thing, okay? First things first. We're going to talk about this Indiana-Penn State game. I think the big thing in the back of everyone's mind is we're really excited about Penn State, but could this be a sleeper game for Indiana? Hines, let me start with you. Do you think Indiana's going to get caught sleeping today? A little excited from their win last week.
I don't think they're going to come out of the gate roaring. Michael Penix in this Indiana offense, they're going to take a while to adjust, just like they took some time to do that last week against Penn State. I think this first half score at halftime, it's a little closer than you'd like to think it is. Noah Vedral, very capable quarterback. We just talked to Jack Ankeny about what he's capable of doing. 18 of 29, completing 62% of his passes. He's no joke. He's no one to look over. I think Rutgers is going to hang around. Ultimately, Indiana will pull away today. I think Indiana doesn't get caught sleeping, so to speak. They do improve to 2-0, but this first half might take Michael Penix a minute to warm up to what we're accustomed to seeing from Indiana.
All right, Jack. So he made the point why it's might be a sleepy game for the Hoosiers, but I need you to make your point. Why do you think this will not be a sleepy game for the Hoosiers?
Yeah, when I look at this game, I think it's that start of the game that's going to be super important. Indiana cannot come out flat in this one. You know, it's a road game. There's not going to be any fans in the stadium. It's going to be a pretty, dead atmosphere. So I think a good start is key for Indiana, or else they will kind of get caught sleeping like you talked about. Tom Allen's word of the week this week was focus, so he's trying to preach that idea to them. But I think, just a quick start is going to be really crucial.
All right, gentlemen. Now let's talk Mike Penix. They were saying early on this season, well, the IU camps I was talking to, Mike Penix for Heisman? Now that seemed a little too big, too soon. But by God, people were talking about it. Now let me ask you this: Mike Penix played great in the final 2 minutes last week and in overtime. But can he keep that momentum going? Can he play great this week? This time, Jack, we're going to start with you. Are we going to see a better quarterback than Penix out there today?
I think so. Rutgers was a big team, trying to create those turnovers. I don't think they get 7 again this week. I think Penix, really focuses on some of those more experienced receivers that he has at his disposal. You talk about a guy like Whop Phillier, Peyton Hendershot. They've been in these type of situations before. So I think Penix calms down and does have a better game than he did against Penn State.
All right, good point there, Jack. Good point. Connor, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Jack to an extent. I mean, Michael Penix last week against Penn State, Indiana was lucky to get away with this win in every way possible. We saw a lot of errant, frankly, bad passes from Michael Penix. An opportunity to kind of get him to calm down against Rutgers. Obviously, Rutgers is still 1-0, but frankly, they're going to give Indiana some chances on offense that IU just frankly did not get a week ago. So I think if Michael Penix can settle down a little bit, maybe establish run game early with Stevie Scott, we know how reliable he is. And then when you get an opportunity, when you have a little bit of the pressure off your back, so to speak, then take a shot rather than feel pressured to take shots as early in the game as they did last week against Penn State, because Penn State is Penn State. I think Rutgers just takes a lot of pressure off either way.
All right, sounds good, sounds good. Now, guys, I want to move into a running back guy. Stevie Scott, man, that guy has been a beast in years past. They're going to need him today, whether they like it or not. He's going to be dominant on that rushing game if Penix continues to not play great. Now, let me ask you this. Stevie Scott, quiet game last week. The entire offense had a quiet game last week. Does he come out and have a big one today? He's proven, being an East Coast kid, he likes to come out and play against Rutgers.
Yeah, Stevie Scott is my guy to watch in this game. I think he rushes for a couple TDs a day. And we've seen in the past how Indiana is so successful, regardless of the quarterback position. We've seen how successful they can be when they establish the run game early. Really takes pressure off these IU quarterbacks, whether it's Peyton Ramsey or now Michael Penix. Just takes some pressure off, and it allows them the opportunity to do what they want with the football. I think Stevie Scott has a big afternoon today in Piscataway because at the end of the day, he's Mr. Reliable for Indiana.
And Jack, before you answer here, I'm going to pivot this question to you. How important is running back Stevie Scott to Indiana's success this season? I mean, clearly he's a big factor.
Oh, yeah. Besides the health of Michael Penix, I think Stevie Scott is the most important player on this offense. And I think a lot of his success really just relies on how often he's getting the ball. Last week he had 20 carries. He did have those 2 touchdowns. It seemed like in the second half they started to kind of go away from him when I thought that, they could really, run some clock out, get Stevie Scott going. Because when he starts getting, a couple carries in a row, finding that rhythm, tiring down the defense, that's when he's at his best. So I think in the second half, even if Indiana is trailing, I don't think they can stray away from the run.
All right, gentlemen, now we're going to turn to the defensive side of the ball. We talked about the receiver core. We talked about the running backs, the quarterback. Yeah, let's talk about this Indiana defense because I think that's why Indiana beat number 8 Penn State last week, if we're being honest. I mean, they played out of their minds. Who could have guessed that Indiana was going to shut down Penn State on 8 red zone attempts and they were only going to get them 3 times? Crazy. But I want to talk most impact is probably that Indiana defensive line. And Jack, coming into this season, we said the Indiana defensive line was arguably the weakest point of this defense. How did they come out and play so well?
Yeah, Griffin, you're right. In some of those preview pods, we talked about how a number one area of struggle for this defense would be that line, but it came up with some huge plays, and it was some guys that we wouldn't necessarily expect. Late in that third quarter, I think it was, Indiana had a big stop against Penn State on 3rd and 4th down, and it was freshman C.J. Person that really freed up Cam Jones to make those tackles. So I think it's a group effort. I don't think you can point to any defensive lineman in specific that, he's going to be a game wrecker. I don't think Indiana has anyone like that. But I think we saw them play well as a unit last week, creating some of those timely turnovers. I don't think you can bank on an interception from a team on their own 5 or 10 yard line like Penn State did. But I think overall that defensive line stopping Pacheco, trying to make Rutgers become a one-dimensional team with Vedral is going to be really crucial.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jack there. I mean, over the past couple seasons, this defense has really become Indiana's calling card. Defensive coordinator Ken Womack comes in here. He sets a goal every week for that first 7 in terms of just a number of turnovers, a number of whatever it may be for that week. Ken Womack really intent on setting goals week after week, and we've seen how fast this defense has evolved under Ken Womack ever since Tom Allen became the head coach at Indiana, and yet again last week. That was the calling card. I think it's going to be again today. Obviously, you would like to see a better offensive performance from Indiana, especially early on in the first half. But when nothing else is going right, generally the defense goes to plan. Michael McFadden last week, 11 total tackles. He's really becoming a leader on this team. And I agree with what Jack said in terms of there's not one real guy who you turn to on this Indiana defense like other schools in the Big Ten. But I think that's what it's all about. It's winning by committee. It's winning as a group. And this front 7, frankly, is one of the best in the Big Ten, or at least one of the best emerging defenses in the Big Ten if they can continue what we saw last week against Penn State.
Yeah, Connor, right. I don't know if I'd come out and say best
whoa,
in the Big Ten. Okay,
one of the best emerging defenses.
I'm glad you corrected yourself because, maybe not even in the Big Ten East.
Emerging.
All right, gentlemen, I want to move on to something else before we go to buy and sell, my personal favorite segment. I want to ask you this. For both sides, winning and losing, who wins it or loses it for Indiana today? I want 2 answers from you. Hines, let's start with you.
What was that?
Who wins and loses the game for Indiana today?
I mean, I think Stevie Scott, as we just said, is Mr. Reliable for Indiana. He's going to continue doing what he did really all of last season, while he was maybe a little quieter last week, as you alluded to, Griffin. Again, Mr. Reliable, I think he gets going. He's going to be the reason why Indiana, I think, takes lead and keeps a lead early in this game. And Michael Penix is going to be the reason why you might lose. I mean, we saw how vulnerable he is in pressure situations. Yes, he was the Messiah, as Griffin Epstein alluded to. Yes, he did everything that he was supposed to do in clutch time. But Michael Penix did not have a good performance last week. There's no sugarcoating it. So I think he's maybe the liability for Indiana this week. Regardless, though, I think Indiana gets back to basics, gets back to business here against a solid Rutgers team, but a Rutgers team that doesn't really have anything which Indiana doesn't.
All right, Jack, how about you? Who wins it, who loses it?
Yeah, I think we've talked about kind of all the key players on the Indiana offense. One person that we haven't talked about, is cornerback Tywan Mullen, who is arguably one of Indiana's best overall players. I think against someone like Vedral, who had a little bit of a shaky game last week, Mullen is someone that you could look to come up with some timely interceptions. So I'll switch it up and say he could win the game for Indiana this week.
Yeah, it's not really an IU football show if you don't talk about Tywan Mullen at least
exactly
10 times. I think that sounds good. All right, guys, we're going to move into my favorite segment, buy or sell. I'm going to list a scenario, And whoever gets to go first gets to pick whether they're going to buy the fact that it's going to happen or sell it and say absolutely no way. And then the other guy who's up next has to make the opposite ruling and back that up as well. So it's got a little fun back and forth. You guys are going to debate a little bit, okay? Buy or sell. Indiana puts up more than 24 points today. Jack, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm buying that. In the pregame video that me and Epstein did, I said Indiana 31-20, so I'm going to buy that.
Okay, all right. Hines, you got to sell it, so go ahead.
Yeah, Indiana is definitely going to score more than 24 points, but for the sake of the game, I think the reason why Indiana's offense might be limited today is, as I just alluded to, Michael Penix and his sort of lack of poise at times that we saw last week against Penn State. If he gets a little excited with the football and starts throwing it where he shouldn't be, an interception or two can easily come about, and that can really change the direction of a game. So I think Michael Penix would be the reason why Indiana's offense is limited in some way today.
All right, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, 7 turnovers last week. That's how many they forced away from the Michigan State Spartans. My goodness, that is a mind-blowing stat for Rutgers. So let me ask this. I don't think they're going to get 7 turnovers, but can they get more than 3 against Indiana today? Buy or sell?
Hey there.
Hey
there, Griffin Epstein, Jack Ankeny.
The fact that Indiana has just been so dominant on that side of the ball, I think there's no reason not to at this point.
All right.
Did you buy or sell that, Connor? I think you used
we bought it. We bought it.
All right, I'm selling that then. I think Stevie Scott's someone that you can rely on to hang on to the ball. I think Penix makes some smarter decisions today, so I'll sell.
You guys really just are struggling with the purpose of the game. They're supposed to do the opposite of what the other person. Anyway, all right. Buy or sell. Stevie Scott has had killer games against Rutgers in his 3 years at Indiana. Bold one here. Buy or sell. Stevie Scott over 145 yards rushing today.
Go for it, Jack.
I'll buy that one. I talked about how Stevie Scott sometimes, in order for him to have his best games, it sometimes just comes down to how often he gets the ball. I think Coach Mike Hart has been someone that's really been kind of advocating for Scott and even Samson James to get a big workload. So I'll say above 145 for Scott this week.
Yeah, and if I have to sell it, I'm going to say Stevie Scott is only not doing those things because Indiana's going to the air instead. I mean, maybe they focus in the air against the struggling Rutgers team, or at least the team that has struggled historically. And Michael Penix wants to show out today and have a good passing day. So that would be why Stevie Scott is maybe less of a factor.
Maybe I just feel it in the air today. I just feel Stevie Scott energy brewing in Bloomington. I just feel it. I feel like this is his day. He's a New Yorker. When they go back to that East Coast, they need it. They want that attention. I think Stevie's going to go for it all today. I see Stevie Scott's having a big game. All right, buy or sell. Indiana's defense did a great job with Penn State last week. Can Indiana hold Rutgers to under, you ready? 14 points.
Oof. Just to put Jack Kinney on that seat, I'm going to buy that. I think Indiana's defense comes out and has a phenomenal performance. Bull take, throw in 3 more turnovers in the first half for Indiana's defense. I think they're going to come out firing. The offense, bit of a different story, but I think Indiana's defense has been the calling card this whole time.
All right, Jack, you got to sell.
Yeah, I'll sell that. I think they get above 14. I said 31-20, so I'll stick with that, or 31-20, so I'll stick with that. I think the Indiana defense won't get quite the timely turnovers that they had last week, which really helped them hang in that game with Penn State, so I'm going to sell.
All right. Last one for you. Buy or sell. Indiana walks out of today's game 2-0 with a, you know what, let's go 21-point win over Rutgers. Buy or sell it?
Yeah, I'm selling that. I think. I'm still selling that. I think this game's actually going to be pretty close through the first half at least. So I don't think Indiana really has that breakout performance in the second half to get it over 21. I think definitely a 2-possession game, but 21 sounds pretty high to me.
All right.
I'll have to buy it for the reasons that Rutgers is just going to Rutgers, right? Rutgers is going to go back to their old ways, sort of revert back. And we've seen historically how Rutgers, regardless of the outcome the week before, has trouble carrying over that performance into week 2. So for those reasons, have to buy it.
Rutger gonna Rutger. Put that on a bumper sticker and sell it. My goodness. All right, gentlemen. I think that's good. Before I let Jack leave, Jack, I need a pick from you. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going Indiana. I said in the preview 31-20. I'll stick with that.
All right, 31-20. He's sticking with the line. All right. Okay, Jack. Proud of you. Betting man. Well done. Well done. All right, Jack. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you later.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. Now bringing in our next guest for the big finish. This is it. Let's wrap it up right here on the rundown. Bringing it down, Galen Claudio, the doctor, is in here today. Galen, great to see you as usual. What's cooking today at the Claudio family house?
Oh, we're kind of keeping it easy today. You know, you got to take some time off. You just go just crazy every week when it comes to the cooking. You're going to burn yourself out early on. And so, you know, on the weekend, just keeping it simple, got some burgers going, getting ourselves ready to go. Made some onion rings, a little bit of a special thing there. I think it's important to mix it up a little bit. Too many French fries. I mean, that'll just eat at a man's soul after a while. So just that's the base menu. Probably going to consider, given how the game is going, might end up throwing something on at halftime as well. But it's a pretty light menu here at the Clavio Tailgate residence.
I mean, in all fairness, you've got reasons to be light after last week. I know we're on Rutgers week, but take us back to last week for a moment. You have been following this Indiana team for centuries at this point. What was last week like for you?
It only feels like centuries, Connor. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I first started really closely following IU football when I was in single digits as a human being back in the 1980s. And so I'm like just barely too young to have a great full-blooded memory of that Michigan win or the Ohio State win from 1987. And there really has been nothing since then. Like, IU has tended to only beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, and it's very rare that they pick up a win of the caliber that they did against Penn State. And look, I mean, you guys all saw the reaction video. We saw the way that Hoosier Nation, the people that really follow IU football, reacted to that. And I think the reason for it is just, it was like watching a unicorn, like just walk into your living room and you blink a couple of times and it's still there. So it really is tremendous. I mean, I feel so good for the program and for Tom Allen and for the very small number of IU football fans that have been following this team for decades. I guess this is, you get one of these every 30 years or so, and that makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, Galen, I got to ask you here. I think before we move on to our Rutgers conversation, I got to ask one more Penn State question for you. Big picture here, you've watched Indiana, you've watched them get closer and closer and closer each year in this Tom Allen program. Where is Indiana on this grand scheme of making it a football school? Where are they in the path? How close are they, or how far are they?
I mean, they're still a long way away. It's a long process, and I think that people need to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. IU last year, they beat Nebraska on the road, and then everybody's like, should sell out the stadium the last couple of games, and it just doesn't work that way because there has to be consistent, sustained success in order for people to get excited regularly about IU football, about following the team, about keeping track of what's happening. There are literally decades of ultimately bad football and bad outcomes that weigh on people's minds or just make them not take it seriously. So, the win last week against Penn State, that's huge because it gives people something to grab onto. The students that are here on campus, they'll always remember that. The alums will remember it. But can they build on that? And I think that in the long march to football respectability, to being a football program, you have to have more wins like that. But then you also have to have wins like this week. Like, you can't follow winning at home against Penn State with losing at Rutgers. It's just that will kill off all of the momentum that you've picked up during this time period.
Oh, hold on. Rutgers is 1-0 though. Why are we hating on Rutgers right now?
No. I think you misunderstand me. It's not that I'm hating on Rutgers, but I don't care who it is. The idea that you would follow up a big win with an egg that you laid on any field, a home field, an away field. If you're playing Ohio State, okay, look, we can talk. But if you're playing Rutgers, home or away, this is one of the few teams in the conference that you are clearly more talented than, just looking at the recruiting rankings for the last 4 years. So that's a game you're supposed to win regardless. It's a game you have to win even more so if you're trying to build momentum and trying to get people to pay attention to you as a football program. I'm not talking about nationally. I'm just talking about the state of Indiana.
Well, let's transition to Rutgers for a second because, again, you've been following the Big Ten much longer than we have. Noah Vedral, you were with us at Nebraska last year when Indiana played him, when he was still a Cornhusker. Now he's leading this new-look Rutgers offense. I mean, they're 1-0. Simply, I mean, are they for real?
Who knows? I just tweeted on the Crimson Cast account. No one knows anything about the conference. I mean, look, last night, Maryland, who looked god-awful against Northwestern, looked like they should be, sent down to the MEAC, turned around and beat Minnesota in overtime. We're watching right now Michigan losing to Michigan State. I don't know what the score is on that right now. I had to leave the comfort of my living room to come talk to you guys. But, I mean, Michigan State, who looked completely out of it, completely lost last week against Rutgers, has been leading Michigan for almost the entire game. So, I mean, look, I think Rutgers, they're not as bad as last year. That would have been almost impossible. I don't know if you looked at Rutgers last year, guys, but that Rutgers team, scored single digits or worse in 7 of their 12 games. They won 2 games on the whole year. They've certainly gotten better. And certainly, I think Greg Schiano is 2 or 3 cuts above what Chris Ash was as a coach. I think Noah Vedral, certainly better than Arturo, I forget what the guy's last name was, whoever the quarterback at Rutgers has been the last couple of years. But what I'm saying is they can be better by a couple of gradations over what they were and still not be that great. But I also think that, with everything going on right now, it's hard to tell how good a team really is. I think we know Ohio State's good, and I think we kind of know that there's a couple of other teams that are good, but it's going to take a few weeks for us to really know for sure.
Well, let's talk about the state of the Big Ten while we're at it, because I think you're looking at Purdue right now, and you look at their upcoming schedule. Let's see, we got minus 20 players Wisconsin week. We have Illinois today. We have then the rest of the Big Ten West, which, as you said earlier, isn't looking great. And then you finish your season against Indiana. As for Indiana, you have Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State still, Rutgers today. I mean, is the Big Ten kind of seeming to not be as strong this year, or is it actually just they're actually just beating up on each other?
Well, I mean, look, COVID has created a lot of issues, and we just don't know what sort of impact that's having. I mean, for Purdue to fall ass backwards into 2 wins like this to start the year is just, and maybe 3, because they're going to go potentially not even have to play Wisconsin next week. It's like this weird cosmic joke that's being played on us all, that Purdue is getting the benefit of not just a week in Big Ten West, but 2 teams that played each other last week that gave each other COVID and essentially knocked each other out of competition. It's just Indiana couldn't have gotten that schedule. No, Indiana gets to play Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State 3 out of their first 4 and has to wrap that around a trip to Rutgers. So I don't know about the Big Ten. I think that much like we're seeing elsewhere in the world of college football, there's just so much weirdness. I mean, Boston College was up most of the game today on Clemson. That disappeared eventually, and I think Clemson's going to end up winning that game. But there's so many little things that turn into big things for a lot of these teams that I think outside of the SEC, there's really not a lot you can take for granted game by game in college football. It's just a very, very mixed up sort of situation.
Galen, just a few more minutes and we'll let you get back to the comfort of your living room there. But we've talked to Griffin Epstein now, Jack Ankeny a lot on this pregame show today about the impact performance of Michael Penix and what that means moving forward. Obviously, nothing to write home about, especially in last week's first half. How much of this is like a get-right game, I guess, for Michael Penix on the road? Yes, Rutgers is 1-0, but Rutgers is Rutgers.
I mean, look, you got to keep in mind a few things. Michael Penix missed a calendar year of football. Like, you got injured in that Northwestern game and then didn't play again, didn't get a spring game, and had very little practice and no games before having to play a defense as talented as Penn State, and still managed to put together a drive at the end of the game to win it, or to get it to overtime, which eventually helped to win it for Indiana. He's also got a new offensive coordinator, and his receivers, there's very little actual rhythm there. So I have not hit the button of panic on Michael Penix. I think that this particular game against Rutgers, I don't know if it's a get-well game. I think it's another progression game. Can he play well for 2 quarters in this game, as opposed to playing well for just parts of a quarter, which is kind of what we saw in that game versus Penn State? Tom Allen afterwards in press conferences this week said, "I've never seen him play like that. Like that is easily the worst competitive game of football he's played, maybe ever. Like maybe even going back to high school." So look, I think Penix, I think the offensive line, I think the running game, like so many pieces for IU offensively, which should have been, or we expected to be better, were not very good last week, and yet they still won. I look at that as a positive, and I think that Rutgers is a really good opponent for them to be playing to try to fine-tune that and get back to a level of competitive dominance, because, look, again, you've got a talent advantage, but this is not going to be a pushover Rutgers team, and that hopefully helps this IU team both physically with what they're doing and also mentally.
So where is Indiana going to win or lose this game today?
I think the biggest thing for IU is not turning the ball over. I don't think Michigan State ultimately loses to Rutgers if they don't turn the ball over 7 times last weekend, as well as Rutgers ended up playing. They've played against this quarterback before. Unfortunately, there's no Scott Frost on the sidelines to bench him for no reason whatsoever, as what happened last year. I think if maybe he plays the whole game, IU doesn't win that game at Nebraska. But I think certainly the supporting cast at Nebraska was better than what Vedril's got right now at Rutgers. So I think the big thing for IU, take care of the ball, don't commit penalties, and be efficient in your play calling. I think Nick Sheridan hopefully was able to knock off some of the jitters of calling his first game. I think he's got to be better in terms of getting athletes into space. Like IU, athletically, you look at the number of people that they've got that have great athleticism that I think will win one-on-one matchups, whether that is Peyton Hendershot or Watt Fillier or Stevie Scott or Samson James or Michael Penix. They've got so many pieces. They need to avoid what they did in the Penn State game, which was try to essentially put everybody either on an island or in a box, get people into space, let them make plays. I think that's going to be the key for Indiana winning today.
Yeah, absolutely agreed there. Last thing for us, Galen, Indiana has grown to a double figure favorite here in this game today. How do you see this thing shaking out? What needs to go Indiana's direction to improve to 2-0?
I think just keep Rutgers down. Don't let them feel like they've got a chance to win. I like Indiana in this game 27-14. I think they'll cover barely. I think it'll be kind of a stodgier kind of game. I think it maybe not too dissimilar to what we saw 2 years ago, where Indiana came out and kind of struggled to get the offense going at Rutgers, but ended up being successful at the end of the day. Maybe not as much as everybody hoped, but enough to get the victory, and that's really what matters here.
All right, Galen, thanks so much for joining us. Get back to the living room, enjoy some football today.
Have a good one, guys.
All right, the legend, Galen Claudio on the show. Appreciate him coming on. And Hines, man, it's time for football.
This has been good. Week 2 of the rundown. I think it was a success. Indiana Rutgers around the corner. Griffin, I got to ask you. We just asked Galen. It's prediction time, baby. What are you going with today?
I'm going big. I don't think Rutgers is that good. I don't think Michigan State is that good, even though they're beating Michigan right now. But it's hardball, so, you never know. Ready? I'm going Indiana 42-14. Oh, yeah. Big day for Mike Penix. 4 throwing touchdowns. I'm going bold today.
I'm going Indiana 31-14. I do think they cover, but again, like I said earlier, I think this first half score, going into the locker room at the halftime score is going to be a little closer than what you would like to see in an Indiana Rutgers game. I think a lot of that is just going to take itself out in the second half. But the fact that Rutgers is 1-0, the fact that Indiana is 1-0, two things that we would not have predicted even a month ago. That's going to change things up a little bit, but I do think Indiana pulls away eventually.
All right, it's 3:30. It's game time. Get off our stream and go watch some Hoosier football. We'll see you next week as we get you ready for a little University of Michigan action. Thanks for joining us. For Connor, I've been Griffin. We'll see you next time here on The Rundown.